Hello, my name is Anala Ngunda, and welcome to my Module 6 Exploratory presentation. Careers. In the Middle Ages, career options were much different and significantly more limited compared to the options we have today in the 21st century. For example, in the medieval ages, women were expected to do the divine tasks of running the home and watching the children. Meanwhile, men were usually the main breadwinners. They often left the home to work outdoors or in other places. Work was also defined by one's status in which they were born into. It was nearly impossible for one to break out of their social class no matter how hard they worked. The roles of men and women during this time was also extremely helpful to the lives that they lived, because while the men went out to make the actual monetary cash, the women were able to stay home and make sure that the household ran smoothly. In the 21st century, however, job options are pretty much limitless. Women are no longer restricted to the house and the kitchen, and everyone now has much more variety in terms of careers. And even though social classes still exist today, it has now become possible for one to change their future and escape the class into which they were born with a little bit of hard work. So today in the job force, you will find both men and women in high positions, and it's taken a long time to get to this point, but we've reached it, and we are so much more different and advanced than we were back in the medieval ages. Travel and relocation. In the medieval times, it was not a feasible idea to relocate one's whole family far out of their region into which they currently lived. Travel expenses would be far too great, and the risk of distance, illness, and unsuccess overall was even greater. Because of this, many families relatively remained where they were for many years. If they weren't making a lot of money in general, it just was not possible for them to move out and go somewhere else to restart, because they didn't have the funds to even support that move. And even if they were a wealthy noble, it wasn't in their best interests to move out of an area where they were well known and protected by their monarch because of their wealthy status. So people usually were born and died where they were born. In the 21st century, however, travel is not uncommon. Many families and individuals relocate constantly for a variety of reasons, such as work, school, or even just a change of pace. And while there are still risks regarding travel today, they're a bit more manageable than they were back then. So even today, we still look at things such as distance to where we're moving, or possibly getting sick, cultural differences, and just unsuccess in general. But it's a bit more manageable today, because back then, if one of them got sick on the road while trying to relocate, chances were they were going to pass away. Nowadays, if you get a bit sick on the airplane flying over to where you were moving to, it's going to be okay, because as soon as you land, you can check yourself into a hospital. Politics. In the 21st century, many expect their voices to be heard and to have a say in how their nation and local governments are run. But during the medieval times, everything was run and decided on by the king. The average individual did not expect their opinions to matter or even be heard. This was especially true for the lower classes. With feudalism being the main form of government during the medieval times, monarchs were able to stay in power due to the support of their wealthy subjects. Supporting the monarch was in the nobles' best interests, because if the wealthy were all sticking together, they would be able to retain their status. While this was something that was very heavily happening during the medieval times, it's also something that we see today in the 21st century a bit. Many that are born rich remain rich, and that generational wealth is passed down and has been passed down a lot over these years. And that is how many high positions in life are consistently held by the top 1%. But that, in the medieval ages, was control of absolutely everything. If you were not a noble, or if you were not wealthy, if you were not royalty, then you were at the very bottom of the bottom. And they had absolutely no say in how their government was run, no say in anything. They weren't even able to petition their government like we are here in the United States today. Here in the United States, even if you are poor, even if you are at the very bottom of bottom in terms of social class, you still have that right. The right to vote, the right to engage yourselves in your politics, etc. And that's the same with many other countries in the world. But back then in the medieval ages, they did not have this luxury. If you were poor, your opinion did not matter whatsoever. Education. In medieval times, education was not an expectation for the average person. The farthest education went for most was to be educated in a specific trade. Rather than spending time in a schoolhouse in order to bring money into their family, many had little interest in school and preferred to work instead. This meant that education was mostly only accessible to the wealthy nobles. Today, however, education is expected in most countries and mandated in even more. For example, in many nations today, it is considered a form of child abuse and is illegal for a child to not attend school. We have become a society that believes education is the key to everything in life. This mindset is only made possible due to the vast changes in the world that have occurred since the medieval age. With more advancements have come more jobs, which equates to more competition, and education is the key to getting to the top. In the medieval times, if your family was poor and your father is always out working hard to bring money in, and your mother is also working hard to watch the house and to make sure that everything in the household is running smoothly and doing all these tasks at home, you don't want to spend your free time going to a schoolhouse to learn how to read or learn how to do this, and that. It just was not in your best interests. As soon as a child was old enough, they joined their parents in helping run the household and helping bring in money and helping just to run the house in general. No one really had time or interest in going to a schoolhouse. Nowadays, though, if you do not have an education, it is absolutely impossible for you to advance in life. You have to have at least a little education in order to do absolutely anything in this world now. And while sometimes that can be frustrating for some, I personally think it's a very positive thing to an extent. And I especially agree that at least all the way to grade 12, everyone should be receiving an education. Thank you so much.